This is a Technics RS-T80R cassette deck. It's a, now as you can see, maybe you could tell because it's on tape too, it's a double deck. And I remember this phrase when 1986, when my father bought this, kept hearing the phrase, double deck with DBX, double deck with DBX. Gotta have that. That's what you gotta have. That's what all of the stereo people were telling him, and that's what he did. He got a double deck with DBX. I remember, and if I have a photo, I'll paste it on here, that the instruction manual came with a sheet of stickers that you could put onto your cassettes indicating if it was DBX, special stickers. That's how important having DBX was, and that's DBX is a noise reduction system that was considered superior to Dolby B and C, which were the other two that were out then. There was also back then Dolby SR that was used in film. There was Dolby A, which was the original, which they retroactively called Dolby A, which was in studios. I'm not going to go into all that. You can look it up. But DBX was from a different company. It was a new kid on the block. It offered a lot better sound quality, supposedly. But what was working against it was that if you had a tape with DBX on it and you played it back normal, sounded horrendous. Where if you had Dolby tapes and you played them back without Dolby, it just sounded hissier. DBX tapes had all sorts of pumping, breathing, weirdness, muffled. It sounded like a cassette that had been run through the washing machine if you played it without the DBX on. With the DBX on, you got excellent sound quality. This thing had 92 dB signal to noise ratio, which is pretty amazing. I mean, CDs back then technically were 100, and I think the tape deck that this replaced, we had an Akai 4000DS reel-to-reel that my dad bought in 1974. That, I want to say, had a signal to noise of maybe 50. And then the nicest reel deck I've ever owned, TIAC A3300SX, I think it had 65 dB. And that was with at 15 IPS on half-track stereo, not quarter-track, half-track. All of you audio nerds are salivating at this, and everyone else has fallen asleep. But that was the nicest tape deck. I still own it. I've got another video coming about that reel deck. And of course, the sound quality was overall with that one, I think, better than this. You had more air, more timbre, more naturalness to the sound than any cassette deck. But this is the best cassette deck that I've owned. The only other one I've owned that comes close was a Sony 835S, I believe was the number, maybe ES, but it had Dolby S. And it had, but it had most of the other features of this. And I liked that one, but I wasn't in love with it. It was near the end of cassette time. Wasn't a big deal. This one I've pulled out of mothballs. It hasn't been used really much in, I'd say 20 years. We used to make car tapes on this occasionally. My dad was very careful with this. He had a demagnetizer. He would clean the heads. He used only TDK SA90 cassette tape. I don't think any other brand of tape has ever even been in this, except for a Tascam high bias cassette that I used to copy one of my band made a tape. It's a long story, but that's probably the only other brand briefly there in February of '94 that I had in this at one point. But other than that, oh, and occasionally there was a Memorex DBS that went in here when my father was copying something for us for our Walkmans. But 95% of the time, TDK SA90 exclusively was what he used. So the reason that I say this is the greatest is not just because of the sound quality, the feathery solenoid controls, which I love. It had reverse on both decks. It has record on both decks. You can record on both of them. You can't record independently. There's been a few Tascam professional cassette decks that have come out that are essentially one chassis so that you could mount it in a rack and save space. But you could use these decks independently. They could record independently on that Tascam. This one, you can't do that. You can use both of them to record the same thing at the same time. It's got one set of inputs, one set of outputs. So you can record one thing at the same time on both of them. Or you could set it, like if there was a long radio show, a concert, which I remember doing when Paul McCartney played Charlotte in 1993. They did a TV broadcast on Fox, and they did a live simulcast on the radio. And I remember setting tapes to record that. I had two 90-minute tapes, and this one, it recorded all the way through, and then it reversed and recorded the other side. Then it went to this one, recorded all the way through, and reversed the other side. Although, I think the concert ended up fitting on one tape, maybe a little spillage onto the other. And then I went back through and edited the commercials out, and it definitely fit on one tape. So anyhow, you could do that. That was called series record. You could set it for that. Parallel record was if they were both recording at the same time. You wanted them to record one side then the other, both at the same time, the same thing. These two reverse modes would just affect whichever single deck was playing at a time. This will only be one side. This will be one side and then the other. Input levels, pretty nice. You've got this. Blank skip was a new feature to me then, and it, you know, if you had a big chunk of blank tape, it would go through it, and if there was nothing on there, it would skip over it. And that was one thing that this had. You could sort of select tracks the way you do in a CD player. You skip through. If you were playing a song and you didn't like it, while it was playing, you hit fast forward, and it would. And you could do this in reverse too. You'd hit fast forward. Oh, it's called Music Select. Nice. And it would find the next bit of blank tape. Then it would, once it passed that and overshot it, it would go back real quick and pick up from the blank. And it was like you skipped over that track. Worked pretty well. Editing. I didn't know what that was when I was little. And it turned out that's just dubbing from 1 to 2. And you could pick the speed if you want a real time or not. And if it was a DBX tape, you could dub off of it, but not encode this one with DBX. Otherwise, whatever you selected here was what happened. If you had out, you were just going straight tape to tape. If you had DBX on, you were playing it back with excellent quality, and then you were getting a copy that sounded great, but didn't have any encoding. And I don't know for sure, maybe you could select Dolby B or C for the recording, so you would encode from DBX to Dolby B, but I very much doubt that was the case. And those are all the controls. This would light up if you were doing double speed, so it's pretty nice. You can see the eject is nice and feathery. Inside, by the way, because of the lighting, this looks neon green, the window to show you what's going on, but it's actually orange. And in there's all the electronics. It's the head that rotates. You can see it's pretty clean. Actually, capstans aren't that clean, but that's because I've been dubbing a bunch of tapes, as I mentioned, in recent weeks. The other one, same deal, pretty good. I remember one time, 1989, 1990, somewhere in there, we were trying to record Christmas music off the radio, and somehow this switch got moved to rec. So whenever you turned the deck on, it would immediately start recording what was in here. Drove me nuts for a few weeks, and somehow I figured out to do that. I thought I had broken the deck. So glad my dad didn't find out about that. Synchro start would be if, you know, when you were dubbing, or if you were recording both at the same time, get them to start at the same time. Auto record mute, that's pretty self-explanatory. It would mute the recording, wait 5 seconds, and pause. And overall, all the controls are pretty well laid out and self-explanatory. Only thing I didn't like, and this was also on the Akai deck we had before this, was that you had a headphone jack with no level control. Now, ergonomically looking at this, I guess I don't know where they would have put said level control, but I never understood that. It always used to be annoying to me. And finally, I think the Sony that I had level control, and a number of the tape decks I've had since have had headphones level control. But that was one thing I wasn't thrilled with in this. Ironically, there's a RS-T80, I believe, that had all of these features, except it didn't have dual recording, and it didn't have DBX. And that was available in silver. I've never seen this one in silver, but it might exist. I don't know. I'd have to pull out the one sheet that my dad got when he bought this. And I remember when it was delivered, we saw the package on the front porch. My brother and my mom was driving us home. And so when my dad got home, I said, hey, guess what? There's a package. Your tape deck got delivered. And he didn't believe me. I don't know if it was really fast or what. He's just like, really? No, I don't think so. And then my mom said, no, look. And I guess she'd taken the package, I remember, and she put it in the car to protect it or something. So before we left, I don't know. And then my dad came out and he was like, oh, awesome. So that was that. That's how that happened. And here, I'll show you. Maybe I can show you the lighting up. So I'll put this. These are just junky tapes. And editing. Do dual speed. There we go. Lit up and then synchro start. And we're recording music. For one day, you're not going to be able to hear it because I don't have this hooked up to speakers. And I really hope this tape's not blank, because I was about to copy it. There we go. Something's happening. This is actually, you won't be able to tell, you'll have no idea. This is an Indian tape, you can tell from there. And it's him singing Ice Ice Baby, but he's changed it to Cool Cool Water, which is actually a Beach Boys song, but this is just a straight rip-off with the riff and everything of Ice Ice Baby, which of course is a rip-off of the Queen David Bowie song Under Pressure. And now I'm copying that to here, and I don't really need to. But that's what's going on. And I've got all that hooked up to my nice Marantz because I'm dubbing the tapes there, and I have 3 left, and then I will be cassette-free in my life, except for a few that I've got that are 4 tracks from my band days, which I'll get to another time. But that is what's happening with this tape deck. And one thing, the reason that I decided to do a video, not just because it's cool looking, I put it out of mothballs and I was using it, and I noticed everything worked flawlessly still, despite the fact that it had been just sitting quietly on a shelf for many years. And then I went to rewind, and it wouldn't move at all. And after a few days of using it, it's like it loosened up or something, and now it's working again. The rewind. Oh, I lied. That side's no good, but this side I think has started to go. Yep, that side started working again. So we got to get this other side back on its feet. And you can rewind. I think you can rewind them both at the same time. Yeah, many of them you can't do that. There's only one motor. Oh, come on, my man. We'll get there. I'll post up another video or an update once that's working. Oh, I probably won't. Who am I kidding? I have 3 tapes to dub. There you go. Enjoy.